Hey guys, tonight we drift into the warmth of a dawn that doesn't come. Birdsong stutters to a halt. The roosters blink in confused silence. Somewhere near Athens, a shepherd squints into the gray haze above the hills, waiting for sunlight that refuses to break. You sit on your rooftop under a blanket, blinking up at the sky, where the stars should have faded by now, but they're still flickering, as if the night is clinging a little too hard. Something's missing, or rather, someone. Far above, the usual golden blaze that chariots its way across the heavens is nowhere to be seen. Apollo, god of the sun, of music, prophecy, poetry, archery, and cheekbones so sharp they've probably started wars, is late. And not fashionably so. We're talking hours late. Somewhere, a sun clock throws up its hands and says, "You're on your own." And this, dear listener, is where our tale begins, not with a bang, but with the subtle dread of morning that won't start. The world is suspended in a gloaming hush, and on Mount Olympus, the divine family starts panicking, though of course, being immortal narcissists, they express concern mostly through passive aggression and whine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You imagine yourself walking the high path toward Mount Olympus. Well, sort of walking. Floating, perhaps, or being carried on a soft cloud. Either way, it's an odd day up there. The usual celestial glow has dimmed to a pearly gray. Hera is pacing, adjusting her earrings unnecessarily. Ares, ever the drama king, has already punched 2 walls and blamed it on the lighting. Athena is curled over scrolls, muttering about heliocentric balance and existential responsibility. And Zeus? Well, Zeus is trying to look calm, which, for him, means throwing occasional lightning bolts into a clay pot and yelling, "Everything is fine," while his beard frizzes from static. Has anyone seen him? Hera asks, but the question hangs there, half rhetorical. She knows the answer. They all know the answer. Apollo is missing. Now here's your one historical fact for this section. The ancient Greeks actually believed that Apollo guided the sun across the sky each day in a golden chariot drawn by fire-breathing horses. No pressure, right? Meanwhile, Helios, technically the OG sun god, got sort of demoted to mythological background extra as Apollo's cult rose in popularity. Historians still argue whether Apollo replaced Helios entirely or if they kind of merged over time in the spiritual equivalent of a corporate buyout. Anyway, back to our chaos. Somewhere down below, mortals stumble through foggy half-mornings. Farmers misjudge when to feed their animals. Sailors hold off launching their boats, because navigating the Aegean in the dark is a one-way ticket to Krakenville. And priests at Apollo's temples fumble through their morning offerings, unsure whether to continue as planned or start praying to Helios again, just in case he's having a comeback. You, in this story, are just a quiet observer, maybe sipping warm barley tea on your roof, watching the uneasy stillness creep through the landscape. It's too dark for birds to fly, too quiet for comfort, but it's also kind of dreamy, as if the world took a deep breath and forgot to exhale. On Olympus, the gods are forming what can generously be called a search committee, and less generously be called a shrieking brunch fight. Hermes volunteers to fly around the mortal realm to check every suspicious barn, brothel, or liar competition. Artemis says she'll check the forests, though with her twin brother missing, she's oscillating between worry and muttering "idiot" under her breath every few minutes. Aphrodite offers to summon him with love, which causes Athena to roll her eyes so hard you swear you hear a marble clink. And then there's Dionysus. Lounging with a goblet of something fizzy and purple, he mutters, maybe he just overslept. Birthdays are exhausting. He grins, swirling his drink. Or maybe he finally took a personal day. Gods know I would. A quirky tidbit for you. In some regional myths, Apollo had as many as 25 lovers across various genders, species, and existential categories, including a mortal boy turned into a flower. That's a lot of anniversaries to remember. Maybe one extra birthday was just too much this time. As arguments flare and divine egos inflate, nobody notices the very obvious clue left in the sky. No golden glow, no flaming wheels, No trail of daylight stretched across the firmament. Just the quiet hush of stalled time. You stretch, listening to the way the stillness hums, like the world is waiting for its soundtrack to resume. Imagine if Spotify crashed and the universe had to sit in silence. That's where we are. Somewhere, a poet stares into his inkpot and forgets the next line. A temple maiden loses her rhythm mid-dance. The whole world is just off. Eventually, Zeus calls what he calls a summit, which is basically a shouting match in a golden atrium with extra cheese platters. A divine intervention, if you will, into a very undivine problem. How does the universe function if its Lightbringer calls in sick? So begins the ripple of chaos. And you, listening from your cozy nest of pillows, might feel a little amused. A god missed his shift. The sun hit snooze. But something tells you this is just the beginning. After all, gods don't disappear for no reason. Even flamboyant ones like Apollo. Especially flamboyant ones like Apollo. You're still nestled somewhere warm in your mind as the story rolls on. And Olympus? Well, Olympus is doing what Olympus does best, overreacting with flair. Zeus is now stomping across the clouds, his thunderbolt dragging a tiny crackle of lightning behind him like a grumpy toddler dragging a blankie. He's muttering things like, how can a god forget his own birthday? And what do we even pay the fates for? The other gods are doing their best to pretend they're busy with paperwork or cloud gardening. Anything to avoid being asked the one question nobody has a good answer to. Where in Hades is Apollo? Now, if you've forgotten the basics, Apollo isn't just your average divine slacker. He's the god of the sun, music, poetry, truth, prophecy, healing, and archery. Basically, if it's glamorous and ancient, he's in charge. Normally, by now, he'd be high in the sky, radiating golden light across the Aegean and casually composing haikus about his own hair. But not today. Today, the sun chariot is parked, the golden reins untouched, and the horses, immortal creatures of flame and wind, are grazing on celestial oats and wondering whether they've been retired without notice. You, curious and a little amused, shift your perspective to Delphi. Yes, that Delphi, the spiritual hotspot of ancient Greece. The Oracle's temple is unusually quiet. A few travelers linger outside, their offerings of honey cakes and woven reeds clutched in nervous hands. They're hoping for visions, maybe a cryptic dream or a vague poem about their crops. But the Oracle? She's having an off day. Not because she's sick or moody, though oracles can be very moody, but because her connection to the divine, particularly Apollo, feels like someone pulled the plug. Inside the temple, she sits cross-legged, her eyes unfocused. Around her are the usual accoutrements, bronze tripods, burning laurel leaves, and bowls of sacred water. A Pythia's world is normally filled with symbols and swirling mists, but today, it's quiet, eerily quiet. No whispers in the steam, no visions in the smoke. She opens her mouth to prophesy and ends up yawning instead. It's that kind of morning. Historians still argue whether the Oracle of Delphi truly experienced divine possession or simply inhaled intoxicating fumes from the fault lines beneath the temple. Some fringe researchers even say the Pythia was high on ethylene gas, turning mystic utterances into a chemically inspired poetry slam. But right now, the only thing rising from the temple floor is a faint draft and a growing sense that something's very, very off. Back in Olympus, Athena decides someone needs to do something. So she gathers her scrolls, ties her silver-gray hair back into a no-nonsense braid, and heads to the Hall of Divine Records. You didn't know gods kept records? Oh, they do. And it's more chaotic than you'd expect. Think of a library, but the books float, the pages whisper, and there's a very grouchy owl who insists on filing complaints in triplicate. Athena mutters, he couldn't have just overslept. She waves her hand, and a shimmering ledger opens midair. The day's divine appointments scroll past her. 8 a.m. Ignite the Sunday, 8:45. Accept offerings from Corinth. 9:15. Inspire a tragic poet. All marked missing. That's when Hermes zips in, literally. Winged sandals, windswept curls. He's holding a half-eaten fig and looking deeply concerned. Well, mostly because it's his day to deliver the nectar and everyone's too panicked to accept deliveries. You're not going to like this, he says, popping the last bit of fig into his mouth. I just checked the underworld. No Apollo. Athena blinks. Why would he be in the underworld? Hermes shrugs. Because he's not anywhere else. This is bad. For mortals, a day without sunlight is a headache and some gloomy weather. For gods, it's a cosmic embarrassment. Birthdays are serious business in Greek mythology. They're not just milestones. They're sacred reaffirmations of power, legacy, and divine relevance. Forgetting your birthday as a mortal means missing cake. Forgetting it as a god means inviting chaos, especially when you're Apollo. Meanwhile, down in a hidden corner of the world, beyond the usual divine gaze, you find yourself walking through an olive grove. The air is warm, the light golden. Wait, light? Yes, a small flickering glow pulses through the trees, almost as if the sun itself has decided to take a vacation in secret. And there he is, Apollo, lying under an ancient olive tree, surrounded by empty amphorae of wine and a stringless lyre. His robes are half undone, one sandal missing, golden hair tangled with olive branches. He's not dead, just spectacularly hungover. Next to him lies a scrap of parchment with one phrase scribbled in divine shorthand: one day off. Apparently, even sun gods need a break. And what better day to disappear than your own birthday, when everyone expects you to sparkle, radiate joy, and eat 12 separate offerings of roast goat. Now here's the fringe tidbit you didn't ask for. In some lesser-known local cults, Apollo was occasionally worshipped as a trickster, a chaos bringer in disguise. Most mainstream myths portray him as noble and serene, but a few obscure tablets suggest that he once played dice with fate, traded sunlight for music, and even turned himself into a dolphin just to avoid royal duties. This might be one of those days. And as you watch him groan and drape an olive branch over his face like a do not disturb sign, you realize the sun god hasn't forgotten his birthday. He's intentionally ghosting it. Bold move. Unfortunately, the rest of Olympus has no idea where he is. And now you're part of the problem, because technically, you know, but you're way too comfortable lying in the grass beside him, enjoying the quiet, the bird song, and the rare feeling of a divine world put on pause. Apollo's eyelids twitch as the morning breeze nudges the olive leaves above him. The grove hums with lazy bees and the occasional coo of a dove, but not a whisper of urgency stirs the air. You stretch, blinking at the golden green light spilling through the branches. Something feels off. There's a gap in your thoughts, like a song you can't remember the chorus to. You sit up. Your head pounds like a war drum played by an overenthusiastic satyr. Nearby, your lyre leans against a rock, missing one string. An amphora lays on its side, empty, of course, and a half-eaten fig squats next to your elbow, swarmed by ants. Glancing around, you realize there's no sun overhead. Wait, no sun. You're Apollo. That's your job. You scramble to your feet, still barefoot on one side. Somewhere, your left sandal has wandered off. Gods are supposed to be radiant. You look like you lost a drinking contest with Dionysus and rolled into a shrub. Not great optics for the deity of light and reason. In the distance, the clouds are thick and gray. Farmers are probably staring at the sky, wondering whether to panic or start sacrificing livestock. Delphi must be in chaos. And the sun is just gone. You forgot to light the sky. You, the embodiment of celestial reliability, overslept. Now here's a fun historical fact to soften the blow. In ancient Greece, Apollo wasn't originally the sun god. That title first belonged to Helios. It wasn't until the classical period that poets started merging the two. Scholars still argue whether this blending was deliberate syncretism or just bad mythological bookkeeping. Either way, today, you're the one everyone expects to shine. You try to compose yourself, wiping dirt from your tunic. It's teal and gold, but the gold's dulled with wine stains. Great. You glance around for signs of divine help, but the grove is empty except for one squirrel who clearly judges your light choices. You mutter a few light incantations just to get the hangover haze off your tongue. Illumina. Ah, blast it. Wait, no, not that one. The sky gives a reluctant flicker, like someone trying to strike a match in the wind. You sigh? Time to face Olympus. You summon a wisp of wind and hop aboard, soaring upward on a current of warm, embarrassed silence. The clouds part sluggishly as you rise, revealing the glittering spires of Olympus. From above, it looks serene. From within, it's probably a train wreck wrapped in a thunderstorm. You land outside the Great Hall of the Gods, still wobbling slightly. The gold-inlaid doors loom ahead, and from inside you can already hear raised voices. You step in, hoping no one's noticed your absence yet. Spoiler, they have. Zeus, eyes blazing like storm lamps, points a trembling finger. There he is, he roars, beard bristling. The sun forgot to rise, and you're out gallivanting in some olive grove with grapes in your hair. You raise one hand in a peaceable wave. Morning, technically. Aphrodite stifles a laugh behind a lace fan. Hermes flashes you a wink, clearly enjoying the chaos. Artemis, your twin sister, just crosses her arms and sighs, a sigh. The one that says, "I told you not to go to that Satyr party." You clear your throat. Funny story, really. I was meditating. Deep divine meditation. Very immersive. Lost track of time. Hera taps her nails against her throne. You missed your own birthday celebration. And everyone else's. You blink. Birthday. Oh no. That's right. It's Thargelion, the day sacred to you. Sacrifices, choral hymns, golden cakes shaped like the sun. You forgot your own divine birthday. If gods could be fired, your desk would already be cleared. A lesser-known tidbit here. The ancient Thargelia festival honored Apollo and Artemis with ritual purifications, feasts, and even the symbolic expulsion of scapegoats. Yep, Athenians used to choose two unlucky individuals to absorb the city's sins and then chase them out. Sort of like divine spring cleaning, but with more existential dread. Anyway, back to your mess. You try a smile. At least no mortals were sacrificed in error. Dionysus, reclining on a fainting couch with a grape cluster in one hand, chuckles. Not yet, but the oracles are improvising. One told a man he'd be turned into a duck. You groan. Poseidon speaks up, his voice like rolling surf. Mortals are panicking. The sailors can't set sail without your light. Crops are confused. The Spartans tried to conquer Thebes again, just for something to do. Zeus raises a palm. Lightning crackles faintly. Fix it. You nod, swallowing hard. Right. Totally. On it. Just quick question. How do I resun the sky without making it look like I forgot? Athena arches a brow. Tell them it was symbolic. A divine metaphor. Mortals eat that up. You snap your fingers. Yes, a mystical eclipse. A reminder of light's return after darkness. Everyone groans, but it might just work. You gather your robes, find your missing sandal in a potted plant, of course, and grab your lyre. Outside, the sky still sulks in gloom. Time to go perform some celestial PR. But first, maybe splash your face. You've got grape jelly behind your ear. Your sandals smack against the cobbled slope as you descend from Olympus, the mist curling around your ankles like sulking ghosts. You've just survived one of the most awkward divine interventions in history. And yes, it was entirely your fault. The gods are still up there arguing about your punishment, and you're already halfway down the mountain. Because if there's one thing you've mastered over centuries of immortality, it's the ancient art of a graceful exit. You head for Delphi, the city sacred to you, Apollo. Normally, you'd float there on rays of sunlight, your arrival marked by golden beams and choral harmonies, but not today. The skies are still overcast, and you can't seem to get a single sunbeam to obey you. Historians still argue whether this was literal weather control gone wrong, or just one massive mythological sulk. But the result is the same. You're walking, and complaining internally. Delphi, nestled in the folds of Mount Parnassus, slowly comes into view. Even under gray skies, its marble temples shimmer with ancient wisdom. It's quiet, eerily so. No pilgrims. No flocks of gift-bearing admirers. Not even a stray goat nibbling weeds. Just the empty columned sanctuary and that low humming coming from the oracle's chamber. You pass through the sacred gates, pausing to tap, one nervously for luck. You once had the Oracle of Delphi recite your birthday like a spell. It was June 7th, for the record. Or at least, that's what the priestesses settled on when the Greeks tried to make your myths align with their lunar calendar. Fringe scholars insist it's all based on the summer solstice and the Thargelia festival. But hey, you never really needed cake. You slip inside the temple of Apollo, once filled with prayers and incense. The Pythia, your oracle, isn't in her usual trance. She's sitting on the edge of the tripod, arms folded, sipping from a cracked clay cup like someone who's been stood up by a deity for brunch. She eyes you with a dry smile. Nice of you to drop by, sunshine. You raise a hand sheepishly. Hi. Bit of a celestial oversight. Oh, I heard, she says, voice thick with sass. The world didn't end, but it did get weird. Farmers say their crops turned to face Poseidon instead. Some guy in Athens claims his dog started reciting poetry. And don't get me started on the bees. You blink. Bees. Bees. They flew in perfect hexagrams, buzzed the Thargelia hymn, then vanished into a cracked amphora. Normal Tuesday stuff, right? You groan and lean against a pillar. So I forgot my birthday. Big deal. She raises an eyebrow. You forgot the day the world depends on your vibe. You're not just a god of the sun. You're the god of rhythm, seasons, music, prophecy, play, and poetry. The calendar literally bends around you. You mutter, so you've read the press releases. And now, she says, standing slowly, you've got to fix it. You sigh, dragging your fingers down your face. Right. Fix the sky, the bees, the poetry spouting dog, and everyone's mood. Exactly, she nods. And to do that, you'll need to relight the chariot. Your eyes widen. The chariot? It hasn't moved since Helios gave me the keys. That's the point, she says. It's sulking. Like you. You let the rhythm slip, and the chariot reflects that. A historical sidebar for you. Ancient myths often conflate Apollo with Helios, the earlier sun god. By the 5th century BCE, Apollo had fully inherited the sun chariot gig. But fringe interpretations suggest the chariot has a will of its own, an embodiment of solar energy that responds not just to physical guidance, but divine intention. Which, frankly, explains a lot. So here's the plan, such as it is. You've got to go to the Sun Forge, the place where the chariot rests when it's off duty. It's an ancient site buried in myth and lava tunnels somewhere below Mount Etna. Because of course it is. Nothing is ever conveniently next door when you're a mythological figure. And since the gods revoke your flight privileges, temporarily, you hope, it's back to mortal-style travel. That means boats, donkeys, and maybe an awkward chariot rental from some confused Thessalian farmer. You step back into the open air. The oracle tosses you a bundle, your cloak, freshly mended, and a satchel of honey cakes. For the bees, she says with a wink. Or maybe just for you, in case you spiral into dramatic self-pity again. You chuckle. I deserve that. More than you know, she smirks. Now go fix the sky. So you set off again, cloak wrapped tight, a god on a journey not of power but penance. Below Delphi, the mountain paths wind like lazy snakes, and far on the horizon, the glint of the Aegean Sea shivers under a muted sky. Somewhere out there, under ash and silence, the chariot waits. You take a deep breath, steady your thoughts, and head into the wind. You wander along the edge of the Peloponnesian coast now, with Apollo barefoot and slightly grumpy. The weather still hasn't quite committed. It's that sticky, undecided kind of air where the sea breeze wrestles with inland heat, and the clouds above hang around like they've forgotten their cue. Apollo adjusts the satchel the oracle handed him, the golden trim catching the dim light. He hasn't peeked inside again yet, either out of pride or pure fear of what else she might have tucked in there. He's not sure where he's going, which is probably not ideal for a god who literally drives the sun chariot across the sky. But without his usual celestial ride and divine retinue, he's discovering something new. Walking is hard, especially through fields of thistles. You sidestep a particularly aggressive patch of brambles, and Apollo mutters something about inventing sandals later. Then, over the hills, he spots a familiar outcrop, the olive trees of Elis. The ancient land of athletes, oaths, and goats. Lots of goats. Elis was where the Olympic Games were born. Well, reborn every 4 years, dedicated to Zeus, but often featuring a surprise cameo by Apollo in the music and poetry competitions. He remembers winning one of those once by accident when he sneezed in C major. The lyre exploded with applause. You follow him toward a small village nestled beneath a crumbling stone amphitheater. Children chase chickens through dry alleys. A woman stirs something suspiciously fishy over a fire pit. Apollo blends in surprisingly well, tucking his glowing hair into a woolen hood he borrowed from a fence post. No one recognizes him, though one kid points and whispers, "He smells like cinnamon and lightning." Fair. He approaches an old man sitting beneath an olive tree, who's playing a single-stringed lyre with no strings. He's just plucking air and humming. Apollo kneels beside him and listens. Lost? The old man says without opening his eyes. I forgot something important, Apollo admits. But I'm not sure what. Sounds like a birthday, the old man chuckles. They sneak up on you, especially when you've had thousands. Apollo freezes. You almost hear the click in his memory. That's right. That's it. His birthday. Today. Or maybe yesterday. Or last week. The calendar system's never been great in the divine realm. But still, how did he forget? Historians still argue whether ancient Greeks celebrated birthdays at all, or if it was more of a monthly nod to your patron deity. Apollo, being both god and celebrated figure, should have had at least a dozen offerings and a minor parade by now. But maybe everyone just assumed someone else would throw it. Classic divine delegation. Apollo sits back, stunned. No one remembered, he murmurs. The old man shrugs. Not even you remembered. That lands hard. Mainstream records suggest the Greeks celebrated birthdays differently, focusing more on name days and shared divine festivals than personal milestones. Still, Apollo had always been a fan of performance, of shining brightly, of making an entrance. And this year, nothing. No ambrosia cakes, no flute solos, no one bursting into song about his golden hair. The old man hands Apollo a dried fig from a wicker basket. "Happy birthday, son," he says. Apollo smiles, genuinely touched. "Thank you. You're the only one." "And that pigeon?" The man nods, pointing. A lone pigeon flaps down and perches on Apollo's shoulder. It coos once and leaves something unpleasant behind. Divine or not, pigeons are consistent. Feeling oddly moved, Apollo begins to hum. Just softly at first, a low, golden note that stirs the leaves overhead. The old man adds his hum. Then the woman from earlier joins with a pot in one hand and a spoon in the other. Before long, the whole village is swaying, tapping, laughing in a casual, offbeat birthday jam. No lyres, no orchestras, just mismatched claps, tin pans, and laughter. This isn't how he pictured it, but maybe, it's better. You sit under the olive branches, leaning back against the tree trunk, the smell of figs and fish mixing in the warm air. The wind catches Apollo's song and carries it westward, toward the sea and the mountains and the gods who missed their RSVP. You wonder if they'll hear it, or care. But for now, none of that matters. He closes his eyes. Best birthday I never planned. A pause, then, still gonna prank Athena later, though. Of course he is. By now, you've just about settled into your dusty little groove among the villagers, playing the lowly, wandering musician part with surprising ease. Sure, your cloak itches and you've slept on hay that smells suspiciously like goat, but there's a strange piece to this detour. It's the kind of simplicity that makes your divine schedule seem absurdly overpacked. Sunrise, sunset, plague here, prophecy there, and don't even get started on the poetry judging contests. Still, even in disguise, you're Apollo. And one evening, as the cicadas thrum like overzealous tambourines, you climb to a hilltop for some solitude. The view stretches wide across golden fields, a lazy river, and, in the distance, the temple of Olympia glinting faintly. You sit there for hours, the sky shifting from orange to plum. It should be peaceful, but your chest is tight, because something isn't right. You try to hum the old hymns, your hymns, and the notes feel off. Not wrong exactly, just unfamiliar, like they belong to someone else. It's as if you've stepped outside your myth and forgotten the script. You squint toward the horizon. You can't shake the feeling you're supposed to be somewhere else. The next day, the old man, the one who swears he taught Orpheus a trick or two, offers you a carved flute. For when you get bored of string plucking, he chuckles. You thank him, then realize you don't know his name. He just smiles, presses a fig into your palm, and wanders off into the barley like a dream fading at dawn. You find yourself returning to that same hilltop more often, not just for the view, but because the villagers start whispering that the stars look strange lately. A girl with a bandaged leg swears she saw Helios ride the chariot too low yesterday, and someone else mutters that crops near Delphi are failing. Oh, that's your gig, remember? The sun, the crops, prophecy. It hits you like a dropped laurel crown. It's your birthday. Or it might have been. The thought arrives as casually as a passing breeze and slams into you with divine panic. You've forgotten. Your birthday. The Olympians usually throw a bash the size of a minor natural disaster. Dionysus brings the wine that violates physics. Hermes makes confusing party games. Artemis mostly sulks in a moonbeam and pretends she's above it all. But still, it's tradition. It's sacred. And you, Apollo, golden boy of punctuality and order, have completely blanked. Historians still argue whether divine birthdays were celebrated according to lunar, solar, or seasonal calendars. Some think gods even had flex birthdays like royalty. But none of that helps now. You've lost your place in the cosmic planner. You try asking a few locals if they've heard anything weird from the oracles lately. One man says the Delphic priestess has been humming nonsense and throwing olive pits. Another says she vanished entirely. A goat kicked someone in the face trying to predict the weather. That sounds bad. So now you've got a choice. Return to Olympus and face the music, or keep hiding out among the mortals while the universe slowly unravels in your absence. Naturally, you do the responsible thing. You bake bread. Yes, you, Apollo, patron of music and logic, end up in a flour-dusted apron learning to knead dough from a one-eyed baker named Kairos, who keeps calling you son boy. Gotta feel it, he growls, punching the dough like it insulted his grandmother. Bread tells you when it's ready. You nod solemnly, pretending this somehow translates into celestial metaphor. That night, you sit by the fire, eating a slice of slightly burned barley bread and watching the stars realign like pieces of a broken harp. You hear a hawk cry overhead. You hear distant thunder, even though the skies are clear. Something is waking up, and you can't hide forever. A mainstream mythological fact. Apollo was not only the god of music and light, but also of plagues. He could both send and cure them. Mortals never quite knew whether to pray to him or avoid eye contact. A fringe detail, some ancient accounts claimed Apollo had periods of self-imposed exile, usually for punishment or renewal. Those scholars still debate if those were allegories or early PR damage control. And while historians still argue whether the Olympians truly felt time the way mortals do, stories like this suggest even immortality doesn't protect you from forgetting yourself now or then. The next morning greets you not with the sunrise, but a sky hung in permanent mauve, like someone tried to paint dawn but ran out of yellow halfway through. The birds aren't singing. The wind's on a coffee break. Even the insects seem to have checked out. It's as if the world has lost interest in pretending. You sit beside a grove of poplars and stare into the almost morning. You've wandered far from the village, through vineyards that failed to ripen, past shepherds who ignored your polite nods. Your mortal disguise still works, but more like a fog mirror now. You can feel the divine tension building behind your ribs, pressure without power, memory without form. You start walking, hoping that motion will clarify something. That's when the world offers you the faintest breadcrumb, a rustle in the undergrowth. Something slithers, not a snake. You'd know. You were once famous for snake murder. No, this feels older. A creature rises slowly from the underbrush, 4 legs, no eyes, a snout like a stitched-up boot. It wears a garland of bones. You squint. You've seen drawings of this thing in your oracle archives. It's an Oneiros, a dream herder. Ancient, rare, usually harmless. Usually, it pads up to you, tilts its stitched face, and drops a bundle of dried fig leaves at your feet. Each leaf bears a carved symbol, a broken harp, a chariot wheel, a crooked sun. You're not sure what to say, so you offer a sincere thanks. The creature nods once, then lurches sideways into the shadows. Gone. You examine the leaves. They hum faintly, like shells pressed to your ear. You recognize these as fragments of dreams. Yours, old ones. The kind you used to send to mortals on golden beams, tucked beneath their pillows. Somehow, they've been returned. Out of order, out of sync. You lie on your back and press a leaf to your forehead, hoping it might trigger something useful. It does. Too much. Suddenly, you're plunged into a memory. No, not a memory. A replay. A crumbling version of a temple festival somewhere on the coast. Worshippers in flowing saffron robes, garlands of rosemary, the perfume of fig cakes, and lemon oil. They're celebrating you. Apollo, bringer of light. Except, you're not there. Your statue is missing. The hymns are slightly wrong. And when a priestess throws laurel leaves into the fire, the smoke spells out a single word before evaporating. Absent. You're yanked out of the dream and sit up gasping. Okay, this isn't a casual amnesia episode. This is systemic. Something, somewhere, has erased you. Not fully, but enough to cause a universal hiccup. You've always suspected the universe had a bureaucratic side, but this is ridiculous. Back on your feet, you march toward the coast. You need answers, and there's one place old enough, strange enough, and probably cranky enough to offer them: the Cave of Thun. It's not listed on tourist scrolls, not even on oracular maps. The only people who know it exists are the ones too afraid to visit. Why? Because Thun isn't a god, or a monster, or a myth. Thun is a whisper, a leftover, a being made entirely of forgetfulness. Reaching the cave takes all day and half a blister. You pass rivers that flow the wrong way, shadows that don't match the trees, and a field of goats singing in chorus. You don't ask questions anymore. By sunset, if you can call it that, you find the mouth of the cave. It yawns open like the throat of a sleeping beast. No torches, no inscriptions, just silence. You step inside. The temperature drops instantly. Your breath curls like incense smoke. The walls are soft with moss and the dust of centuries. You hear murmurs, none of them coherent, just fragments. Names, places, birthdays. And then, a voice, not loud, but present. Forgotten your appointment, have you? You spin. There's no one there. Just a ripple in the air that seems amused. I don't remember making one. You reply cautiously. Exactly, the voice says. A shape begins to form from the darkness. It isn't frightening, just incomplete. Like a sketch someone abandoned halfway through. It hovers. You're Thun, you say. I was once, it murmurs. Now I'm what's left when gods forget. You take a slow step forward. Someone's tampered with me. Erased part of my essence. Not tampered, says Thun. Returned. Your birthday came and went, and you didn't claim it. So the world began reallocating your significance. You became a clerical error. You blink. That's not how divinity works. Historians still argue whether divinity is power or perception. Thun replies. But the truth is, you are only as real as you are remembered. You sit down, stunned. A quirky theory comes to mind. One you heard from a philosopher who wore 12 belts and kept bees in his hair. He claimed the gods were just very consistent stories with good PR. You thought it was cute. Now, it feels prophetic. So how do I fix it, you ask? Thun pulses slightly, like a candle in wind. Find the first thing you forgot. Everything else will follow. You nod slowly. That means going back, to the sacred grove, to the laurel tree where you swore your oath of light. Maybe even further. You rise. Thun says nothing more, just fades back into the murk. Outside the cave, the sky is now bruised purple. A single star flickers above the horizon. Your star, barely visible. But there, you start walking. You cross the brittle ridge at twilight, sandals crunching over shards of ancient shale as the wind hums low and metallic between the stones. The cave behind you, Thun's forgotten chamber, now feels like another life. Apollo's thoughts swim with riddles and shadows, but one thing is crystal clear. He's missed his own birthday. Again. And while mortals might shrug it off with a cupcake and some retail therapy, for a god, it's cosmic level awkward. Up ahead, the Aegean Sea glimmers like polished glass. You descend toward it, and with each step, the golden glow in your chest, Thun's parting blessing, flickers brighter. Apollo isn't just sulking. He's going to fix this. Not with time travel. That's Hermes' mess. No, Apollo will rekindle his own myth by doing what he does best, creating spectacle. You wade barefoot into the tide, sandals slung over one shoulder. The water licks your skin with chilly affection. Then comes the plan, spontaneous as lightning. Tonight, you'll host your own delayed birthday festival, with just a hint of godly flair. The ancient port town of Theros sits up ahead, asleep behind terracotta walls. Its people snore in clay cottages, unaware their sleepy Tuesday night is about to turn into something Homer might have bragged about. But you're not here to disrupt. Just borrow. A little lyre music. A little fire. A little theatrical moonlight. You start with the dolphins. They arrive first, sleek, salt-slick, clicking their greetings. One of them presents a fish, clearly confused about what kinds of gifts sun gods want. You pat its snout anyway. Then, raising your palm, you hum a note, clear, golden, vibrating. It stretches like a silk ribbon over the sea, coaxing up a glowing arch of water that pulses with rainbow hues. Historians still argue whether this event sparked the legend of the Aurora dolphins of Theros, described on a single broken amphora found in the 1800s. The dolphins, for their part, don't care. They just spin under the watery rainbow like party guests who showed up early and brought snacks. Now for Phase 2. You march toward the town's amphitheater, long abandoned, its marble rows cracked by vine and time. With a touch, you sweep away centuries of dust. Vines slither backward, bricks knit themselves, and suddenly it's as if the actors just left for intermission. You conjure golden lanterns, hovering orbs of soft light that hang from the air itself. No oil, no flame, just soft warmth, like the last moments of a perfect nap. Then comes the music. You lift your invisible lyre, its strings thrumming even though it's not there. The sound curls into the night like jasmine smoke. Heroes wakes. One by one, windows creak open. Villagers peer out, baffled, then entranced. They follow the sound like sleepwalkers. Barefoot and robed, they trickle into the amphitheater, rubbing eyes, clutching loaves of bread, clutching each other. A few bring goats. Of course, you greet them not with words, but with music, a tapestry of harp, wind, and whisper. Each note slides into the next like honey over warm bread. A young girl begins to dance. An old man starts to cry. A teenager tries to clap on beat and fails spectacularly. Quirky footnote. Somewhere in that crowd is the ancestor of the first recorded Greek mime. True story. That guy over there, the one mimicking your lyre playing with a broom handle, he'll start a trend that becomes a profession, then a street performance, then an art form. Thanks to you. Backstage, or really, hillside shrubbery, the gods begin to gather. Artemis arrives first, always curious when her brother goes rogue. She sits on the edge of a crumbling column and munches an apple like it's popcorn. Dionysus floats in next, already buzzed and wearing 2 different sandals. Even Athena drops by, pretending she's there to observe mortal behavior for academic reasons, though she laughs way too hard at one villager slipping on a goat. You don't acknowledge them. This is your night. You spin, leap, and lift your arms skyward. A sunburst blooms above your head, painting the sky in streaks of coral and gold, midnight pretending it's dawn. And then, the final act. You raise your hand, and from the ground rises a birthday cake. Not a mortal one, no? This thing is an architectural feat, layered with spun sugar columns, olive leaf frosting, and candles that flicker with starlight. The villagers gasp. Even Artemis chokes on her apple. You don't blow the candles. You snap your fingers. The lights go out, then burst into a kaleidoscope of skyfire, silent fireworks that shimmer above the sea, falling like flower petals made of flame. The mortals cheer. They don't know why. They just feel it. Joy, awe, a tingle in the soul. You give them the best parting gift of all, a dream that doesn't fade in the morning. Later, when the villagers return to bed, they'll be unsure if it happened. Some will blame fermented grapes. Some will carve crude dolphins on their door frames. One child will claim to have spoken with a rainbow, and she won't be wrong. Back at the amphitheater, the gods begin to clap, slow, sarcastic, half impressed. Nice party, Artemis says, nudging you. Almost forgot you existed. You shrug. That's the idea. And somewhere, in the flicker of that dying firelight, Apollo smiles. Not the smirking sun god grin. A real one. Small, quiet, honest. Because tonight, he remembered who he was. And that's enough. You're not entirely sure how you ended up watching a golden chariot materialize midair, but here we are. The villagers have barely finished scraping frosting off their robes when the stars above begin shifting, ever so slightly, into a spiral. It's subtle at first, 1 or 2 celestial dots inching along, but soon the entire firmament is swirling like stirred ink. A single beam of honeyed light pierces through the sky and lands just in front of Apollo. And there it is, his sun chariot, shimmering and patient, the horses snorting quietly like celestial cats waiting for their breakfast. You blink. Apollo doesn't. He sighs instead, places his hand on the lead horse's muzzle, and mutters something only fire-breathing stallions would understand. A pause. Then he turns back to the villagers and, with a sheepish half-smile, announces, "Well, I've really got to go." The chariot glints in readiness. But instead of hopping aboard and dramatically ascending like the diva he most certainly is, Apollo strolls over to the olive grove. He stands in the shade and starts whispering to the trees. You think you've misheard. But no, he's whispering. to trees. The villagers freeze in collective confusion, unsure whether they're supposed to leave, applaud, or drop to their knees. Is he apologizing? An old woman hisses to her goat. Turns out, yes. Apollo, golden god of light, music, and midday sunburns, is standing among the twisted olive trunks, quietly murmuring a heartfelt apology to the land itself. Not for a war, or a plague, or even for forgetting his birthday, but for centuries of divine neglect, for temples left to crumble, for fields once tended by demigods, now filled with weeds, for the idea that gods only descend when people beg. One of the trees, yes, the tree, shudders gently and drops a single olive. Apollo picks it up reverently and tucks it into his belt like a keepsake. A moment later, vines creep out along the grove's perimeter, curling lovingly around the amphitheater stonework, as if the land is saying, "All right, we remember you." Here's your historical tidbit of the day. In ancient Greece, groves of olive trees were often considered sacred, especially those tied to Athena. Destroying one could lead to exile. Even the bureaucrats respected them, which, let's be honest, is rarer than a sober satyr. You'd think Apollo would end the night there, with a poetic tree moment and a cinematic getaway, but no. The chariot waits. The villagers mill about awkwardly, and then, without warning, Apollo lifts his arms and calls out, "Where's that goat with the hat?" A very startled goat wearing a slightly crooked laurel crown, a gift from a child earlier, probably, is shoved forward. Apollo bows. The goat sneezes. A priest faints. Standard divine protocol. Then, with a sweep of his hand, Apollo creates something truly ridiculous. A gleaming stone plaque, etched with shimmering golden script, declaring today the first official festival of slightly forgotten birthdays, to be held every 100 years in Heroes. On this day, everyone must eat too much honey cake, swim at midnight, whisper apologies to at least one tree, and make a toast to things we accidentally forgot, but still love anyway. Historians still argue whether this event inspired the obscure but charming festival of Amnesiaca, noted briefly in a fragment of a 2nd century scroll, which mentions celebrations of memory and olives. Most believe it's apocryphal, but then again, most historians never personally witnessed a goat get knighted by a solar deity. Finally, Apollo approaches the chariot. His hand brushes the sunbright reins, and the horses rear up, not in fear, but excitement. He hesitates, looks back at the villagers, at the grove, at the goat, still chewing on its own laurels. He raises 2 fingers in a casual salute, steps aboard, and ascends. No thunderclap, no explosion of light, just a quiet lift into the dark morning sky, the stars parting to make room for him. The villagers watch until he disappears into the swirl of dawn. You lie back on the amphitheater steps, which feel warmer now, not just from Apollo's residual glow, but from something softer, like the place is humming with remembered purpose. A gentle lull, like the exhale after a good story or a meal shared with someone you hadn't realized you missed. Someone nudges your elbow. It's the kid who made the goat hat. "Hey," she whispers, "you want the rest of my cake?" You accept without hesitation. As you chew, olive sweet and sleep heavy, the world tilts just slightly. You're not a hero. You're not a god. You're not even sure where your shoes are. But for tonight, you belong to something ancient, something warm, and something utterly absurd. And really, isn't that enough? By the time you shuffle into the clearing, it's clear this day has gone completely off script. The goats have somehow formed a conga line. The villagers are toasting with amphorae of diluted wine that's probably more vinegar than vintage. And Apollo, sun god, lyre master, poetry prince, is sitting cross-legged on a tree stump, sulking. Yes, sulking. His golden hair is slightly mussed, and his laurel crown is crooked, as though he tried to fix it and gave up halfway. You step closer, and he looks up with the weary eyes of a divine being who just remembered he forgot his own birthday and has spent the past few hours pretending he didn't care. "I didn't even get cake," he mutters. It's such a mortal complaint that you almost laugh. Instead, you offer him half of your olive-stuffed pastry. He accepts it without ceremony. He doesn't thank you, but he does hum a little as he chews, and you count that as progress. Now, let's be honest, Apollo forgetting his own birthday isn't entirely surprising. Historians still argue whether the gods ever aged or celebrated mortal concepts like years. One school of thought says the Olympians existed outside time, while another insists they participated in seasonal rituals, including birthdays, as a way to reinforce their mythic narrative among humans. Apollo? He clearly wanted this one account. You ask him why he forgot, and he gestures vaguely toward the sky. Too many oracles, too many festivals. One day melts into the next. Then he adds, a little quieter, and everyone always assumes I'm fine. Golden boy and all. Ah yes, the curse of competence. Even deities aren't immune. He kicks at a rock and hits a beetle instead, which he apologizes to with surprising earnestness. You get the feeling Apollo doesn't get many chances to just sit and be a person, or whatever passes for a person when you're a glowing, lyre-playing sun entity. You remind him that the celebration is still happening. There's time for cake, even if it's made of barley and goat cheese. I just wanted someone to notice, he mumbles again, which is ironic, because the villagers have noticed. In fact, they've made him a little altar, complete with a palm-sized chariot carved from driftwood, surrounded by sprigs of rosemary and shiny pebbles. Children are taking turns guarding it, like it's a sacred relic, which, let's be fair, it kind of is. You guide him back toward the square. His mood lifts incrementally, like the sun rising over Mount Helicon, slow, steady, inevitable. A child spots him and yells, "He came back." Another shouts, "We saved you some honey cake." Apollo smiles. Not that distant, celestial smirk he gives from marble statues, but a genuine, slightly bashful grin. Someone hands him a flower crown, daisies and thistles this time, and he puts it on without complaint. Then the crowd begins chanting something suspiciously resembling, "Birthday, birthday, birthday." He waves a hand. "You mortals are ridiculous," he says. And yet, he stays. You settle beside him as villagers begin performing a hilariously improvised song of Apollo, which includes the line, "He shines like soup in the noonday light." A creative interpretation, to be sure. The goats are trying to harmonize. Or maybe they're just bleeding. It's hard to tell. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd boy trips over his own lyre, and a burst of dissonant strings slices through the evening. Apollo winces. "Maybe I should offer a few lessons," he murmurs. But he doesn't leave. Not yet. Instead, he picks up a reed flute someone abandoned and plays a tune, soft, sweet, and aching. The village quiets. The goats pause. Even the sky, streaked now with indigo and gold, seems to lean closer. It's one of those rare moments where time folds a little. You remember a historical tidbit from an old papyrus scroll. In certain Delphi rituals, followers of Apollo believed that music could soften the soul and realign the cosmos. Maybe that's what this is, a cosmic retuning. He finishes the song, and for a beat, no one speaks. Then someone yells, "Cake," and the spell is broken. But Apollo looks lighter now, as if the flute let him exhale something that had been stuck in his ribs for centuries. He thanks the villagers, properly this time, with a bow and a flourish that sends flecks of golden light swirling into the air. The children chase them like fireflies. Then he turns to you. "I think I'll remember this one." You nod, "Even if you forget again next year." He shrugs. "That's what mortals are for." And then, you guessed it, he takes a bite of cake. It's barley, goat cheese, and just a hint of figure. Not ambrosia, but close enough. As the stars begin to peek through the fading indigo sky, you lean back against a fig tree and watch the most radiant being in the pantheon eat cake and laugh at goat jokes. History rarely feels this warm. You lean into the evening now, where the golden warmth of the celebration has softened into firelight flickering over familiar faces. The villagers of Thimbra, once strangers, now adoring hosts, gather in cozy clusters around hearths and lanterns. Some rest against stone walls. Others recline on embroidered rugs spread under ancient olive trees. The sky above is a deep, flush navy, scattered with stars like a careless hand flinging pearls across velvet. Apollo, still barefoot, still radiantly human, sits with a child dozing against his shoulder and a lap full of plum pits and broken lyre strings. The day's absurdity has folded into fondness. And yet, under that divine exterior, something stirs. You catch it first in his eyes, a glimmer of recollection, like a candle guttering to life in a cold room. Wait, his birthday. His birthday. Apollo stiffens slightly, a motion so small only the curious goat beside him notices. He murmurs something in celestial shorthand, just a breath, and a thread of golden mist slithers up into the sky, unfurling into a constellation like a silent alarm. It's been his birthday all along. The very festival he wandered into, confused and cake-hungry, was meant for him. He didn't just forget the day. He forgot himself. In the cozy clamor around the fire, no one notices the slight shift in his aura, the way his skin glows faintly warmer. But you notice. Of course you do. You're watching like a sleepy time-lapse camera, tracking the moment when a god remembers his divinity and simultaneously decides not to correct the record. Because here, among mortals, among figs and laughter and misremembered folk songs, he's something rarer than divine. He's celebrated. The villagers start a new game involving throwing laurel leaves into an amphora while blindfolded. It's exactly as dumb as it sounds, and Apollo laughs, a real, loose-limbed laugh that makes the fire crackle brighter. A teen boy, barely old enough to grow a patchy beard, tosses a wreath of myrtle onto Apollo's head, crowning him again. For the birthday god, the boy jokes. Whoever he was, Apollo accepts it, solemnly, because humor is holiest when played straight. May his goat be ever plump, he intones, raising a half-eaten apple. No one knows. And yet, do they? The village elder, sipping something suspiciously herbal, looks over the rim of her cup with eyes too sharp for her years. She smiles, not with surprise, but with confirmation, as if she'd suspected all along. As if gods don't need to declare themselves when their light is this obvious. Historians still argue whether the Thimbra festival actually originated from an ancient, forgotten rite honoring Apollo's human incarnation. Some say it predated Olympus itself. Others insist it was all a case of seasonal calendar overlap and too much fermented honey brew. Either way, the moment persists in retellings as both hilarious and holy. Quirkily enough, one surviving scroll from Delphi even mentions a Sundimmer's feast celebrated once every 11 years, dedicated to he who forgot he was flame. Scholarly footnotes call it apocryphal nonsense. But honestly, isn't that half of ancient history? The night deepens. The goats have collapsed in pie-induced stupor. Children curl into parent-shaped bundles. The music has slowed into an occasional hummed verse. Apollo lies back on a woven mat, staring up at a sky that finally feels like his own again. You hear him whisper, not a spell, not a sonnet, just one soft word. Thanks. You realize something then. This isn't a story about forgetfulness. It's about choosing to remember slowly, letting yourself be small, mortal-sized, celebrated for being, not blazing. And in that choice, Apollo isn't diminished. He's made real, relatable, tangled up in the messy miracle of being loved, not just worship. You, of course, are still floating nearby like an invisible friend, watching all this unfold with the drowsy awe of someone half asleep in a too warm room. The fire pops. A moth does a clumsy pirouette in the lamplight. Somewhere, a lyre string breaks with a final, comic twang. The party winds down, but the feeling does not. The moment stretches like a golden thread, soft and infinite, between the stars and the soil. You're still awake, somehow, but not for long. You walk along the hillside with Apollo, now fully aware of who he is, but still oddly unsure of what it means to feel like a god. His hair glows faintly in the golden light of late afternoon, and his steps are oddly soundless on the dry grass. The villagers trail behind you, still cheerful, still unaware of the divine guest in their midst. One little girl insists on holding his hand. He doesn't mind. She reminds him of Artemis, back when they were young and still in sync. You all arrive at a sloped meadow overlooking a sunlit valley. A crude wooden altar stands at the edge, draped in faded cloth and wildflowers, an old place of worship forgotten by most. The woman from before, the one with the sharp gaze and knowing smile, invites Apollo to sit beside her. Her name is Hagni, and she remembers things other people forget, like gods and birthdays. She places a single honey cake on the altar. For whoever you truly are, she says, not looking directly at him. We remember you, even when you don't. The wind hushes. Even the goats stop chewing for a moment. Apollo blinks, and you could swear a shimmer of light ripples across his shoulders. Then, finally, he laughs, a soft, warm laugh like sunlight breaking through clouds. You sit down beside him, and though you still can't quite grasp the weight of his divine memory loss, You understand something deeper, that even gods can feel small, uncertain, and a little homesick. This moment feels ancient and yet utterly present. The valley, the fading sun, the old cake on the altar, it all seems suspended, timeless, like it's been waiting for him to come back. For the god of light to find a sliver of shadow to rest in. Historians still argue whether Apollo had human incarnations who mingled among mortals. Fringe scholars even suggest he once became fully mortal for a century or two, just to remember what love and forgetfulness tasted like. You glance again at Hagni, who now hums an old hymn under her breath. You don't recognize the words, but they feel older than the hills. Maybe it's Delphic, maybe it's nonsense. Still, it makes Apollo close his eyes, just for a moment. Do you miss them? You ask quietly. He doesn't respond right away. Then, sometimes, he says. Other times, I forget what I'm supposed to miss. You nod. You get it. Memory's a tricky beast, even for gods. A young boy scrambles up the hill, breathless, waving something in his hand. It's a lyre, a little rough and badly tuned, strung with goat gut and ambition. I made it, he says proudly, offering it to Apollo. They said you used to play. Apollo blinks again. This time, you see the sadness behind the glow. I did, he says. I do. I forget the songs, though. The boy frowns. Then make new ones. That lands hard, like an arrow dipped in honey. Even Hagni chuckles, shaking her head. Apollo takes the lyre. He plucks one tentative note. It rings off-key, wobbly, real. He tries again. Another note, a little brighter. Then a third. A rhythm begins, lopsided but alive. Birds tilt their heads. A goat sneezes melodically. You smile. And just like that, the god of music remembers how to play. The villagers begin to hum. One by one, voices rise like mist, threading into the evening. The old altar seems to glow faintly with reflected light, not from the sun, which is already dipping below the ridges, but from somewhere else. Somewhere inside. You lean back on the grass. Your eyes flutter closed for a second, but you don't want to sleep. Not yet. This is the part of the story that deserves to be remembered, after all. A mainstream myth says Apollo once gave up his godhood after slaying Python, to learn humility. Others say he was simply bored of Olympus, too clean, too predictable. But here, on this sun-warmed hill with a child-made lyre and a birthday cake of wild honey and oats, he looks anything but bored. Here, he is present. Mortal, almost. And yet more. You lie back fully now, arms behind your head. The sky shifts to indigo. Stars blink open like shy fireflies. Someone passes you a warm figure. You eat it without thinking, juice sticky on your lips. The lyre tune grows steadier. Apollo's fingers find memories in strings. The music doesn't sound ancient or divine. It sounds local, imperfect, alive. You wonder if this is what Olympus forgets, that beauty can be homemade and lopsided, sung by children and carried on goat breath. And just as that thought drifts across your half-sleeping brain, Apollo starts humming too. Not a hymn, not a prophecy, just a tune. Simple, familiar, and you recognize it. It's Happy Birthday. You laugh. Softly. So does Hagni. And the villagers? They don't even question it. They sing along, clapping off rhythm, laughing as they forget the lyrics halfway through and make up new ones. It's perfect. And for the first time all day, Apollo doesn't look confused. He just looks home. The next morning, you wake up to the sound of roosters crowing and Apollo softly humming. The god is already up, staring into the glowing embers of a fire that somehow stayed lit through the night. His lyre rests in his lap, and his expression is unreadable, peaceful, maybe, but with a thread of sorrow running beneath. You stretch, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and sit beside him. You okay? You murmur. He nods slowly. I think I remember almost everything now. You don't press him. You've learned with gods. Sometimes memories surface like mist, fragile and easy to break if disturbed too soon. The village begins to stir. Children emerge rubbing their eyes, chasing geese or wiping crumbs from their faces. Hagni walks out of her hut carrying 2 wooden bowls of warm barley porridge, handing one to you, the other to Apollo. He accepts it with a grateful nod and eats silently. And then the strangest thing happens. As the sun crests the horizon, casting gold across the dew-slicked fields, Apollo begins to laugh. A rich, melodic laugh that rises and rises, echoing through the trees like a ripple through still water. I remember, he says finally, looking at you. My first birthday. Not this one. The original. You blink. Wait, like the real one. Yes, he says, standing up. The day Leto gave birth to me and Artemis on that floating island. Delos. Now, this is a moment. According to mainstream myth, Apollo and his twin sister Artemis were born on the island of Delos, which had been a wandering rock until Zeus anchored it in the sea just in time for Leto to deliver her divine twins. Apollo, even as a newborn, is said to have radiated golden light and sung his own birth song. Because of course he did. But here's the wild part. Historians and archaeologists still debate whether Delos was always sacred to Apollo, or if it became important only after people started associating it with his birth. Some say earlier deities may have claimed it first, and Apollo just moved in. You remember that? You ask. He nods, and a faraway look enters his eyes. It was cold. Artemis came first. She didn't cry. I did. Loudly. My mother kissed my forehead and whispered, "You'll make the world brighter one day." You glance at the villagers around you, all now watching Apollo with silent reverence. I think she was right, you whisper. Quirky detail of the day? In some fringe versions of the myth, Apollo's first gift as a baby was not music or prophecy, but sarcasm. Apparently, he made a perfectly timed joke about Hera's jealousy, which no one appreciated. Even as an infant, Apollo knew how to stir a room. As he speaks, his glow begins to return, not in a blinding way, but in gentle pulses, like the sun rising behind a sheer curtain. And then, without a word, Apollo walks to the altar, places a single olive branch upon it, and turns to face the crowd. Today, I remember who I am, he says, and I choose to stay a little longer. You swear you can feel the air itself nodding in approval. A new energy flows through the valley. Birds chirp a little louder. Bees flit faster. Even the goats seem smug. As Apollo begins to hum a soft tune, the villagers gather around him once more. It's not a performance, not a miracle, just a moment, a shared breath, a quiet harmony between mortal and divine. The kind of thing you wish more birthdays felt like. You think the day can't get more magical until it does. After breakfast, Apollo announces that he wants to do something special. Not flashy, not divine, just meaningful. I want to help with the harvest, he says plainly, pointing to the golden fields beyond the olive groves. You nearly spit out your barley tea. You? Harvesting wheat. He grins. You mortals think I'm just about liars and sunbeams. Watch and learn. The villagers, understandably stunned, scramble to lend him a side. He takes it awkwardly, handling it like someone picking up a fish for the first time, both reverent and confused. But soon enough, he's out among the rows of ripe grain, amber stalks swaying around him, sleeves rolled up, working alongside the others. It's surreal. You've seen statues of Apollo in temples, always tall and distant and glowing. But here he is, sweating, stumbling a little, laughing when a goat bites his tunic. He even wipes his brow with the back of his arm like any other farmhand. That's the thing about gods. They're weirdly charming when they're being terrible at ordinary stuff. A child, Nico, the baker's son, hands Apollo a basket to fill. Apollo bows to him like Nico's royalty. The child giggles. Fact of the day. In ancient times, Apollo was not just the god of the sun and music. He also had dominion over plagues, medicine, and agriculture. Yes, this shining golden icon also oversaw your sneeze attacks and grain cycles. Historians still debate how these seemingly unrelated duties connected. Was it purification, renewal, or just the ancient Greek version of multitasking? Apollo, for his part, seems delighted to be part of a simple routine. He walks beside a woman threshing barley, asks her how to tell when the grain is ready, and actually listens to the answer. At one point, he even whistles a tune that gets the entire field humming along. And here's a quirky tidbit you didn't expect. Apollo can't whistle on key. His divine voice. Immaculate. His whistle? A little sharp and slightly warbly. You'd never tell him, of course, but it's strangely comforting. Even immortals have off days. By midday, the heat is thick, the field buzzing with cicadas, and everyone's back aches. Apollo wipes his hands, now calloused and nicked, and says, "Lunch break." The villagers cheer like they've just won a battle. Everyone gathers under a canopy of fig trees where long woven mats are rolled out, and bowls of olives, grapes, cheese, and warm bread are passed around. Apollo sits with you, legs stretched out, basking in the shade. You break bread together, dipping it into oil, biting into sweet figs, sipping cold water tinged with mint. He leans over. I think this was the best morning I've had in 1,000 years. You glance at his dirt-streaked arms and tousled curls and say, "It's the goat bite, isn't it?" He laughs so hard he chokes on a grape. Later, as the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the golden fields, Apollo rises and begins to hum again. Not for performance, just a soft melody, a lull in the day's rhythm. And you feel it settle into your bones. The strange warmth of shared labor, the joy of sweat-earned rest, the magic of a god remembering what it means to belong. No miracles today, no thunderbolts or temple revelations. Just one forgotten birthday, turning into the kind of day you'd wish you could relive forever. Evening in the village settles like a sigh. The last golden threads of sun drape themselves over rooftops, and the air smells of rosemary, smoke, and something baking. You stretch your legs, sore but satisfied, and glance at Apollo, who's helping a child gather figs in a worn linen sack. You don't say it aloud, but something has shifted in him. Maybe it was the goat, maybe the bread, maybe the fact that no one asked him for a prophecy or sacrifice today, just company. He walks over and sits beside you on a low stone wall, brushing fig leaves from his sleeves. "You know," he says, "I forgot my own birthday." You raise an eyebrow. You think. He chuckles. But maybe that was the point. I didn't need temples or hymns today. I just needed this. He gestures to the world around him. The rustling trees, the smoke curling into twilight, the hum of crickets. And, he adds, I needed someone to remind me what it's like to just be. A breeze picks up, tugging at the edge of his tunic. Historical note. In the ancient world, birthdays weren't quite what we picture today. The Greeks celebrated name days more often than birthdays, and gods weren't known for annual cakes and candles. Instead, they were honored with hymns, offerings, and festivals, like the Hyacinthia for Apollo. Historians still argue whether the gods themselves aged or kept track of time at all. You look at him. You gonna start keeping a planner now? He laughs. Gods don't do planners. We do omens. Then he falls silent. The kind of comfortable silence only possible between friends at the end of a very good day. Eventually, torches are lit. The villagers gather near the hearth, where someone starts plucking a lyre and singing a sleepy song about olives and old goats. Apollo listens, smiling but quiet. You swear he hums along softly. Quirky fact, in certain Greek cults, Apollo was believed to retire each winter to the mythical land of Hyperborea, a place of peace and golden light. You wonder if, just maybe, this quiet evening is his own little Hyperborea. When it's time to go, he rises slowly. I won't forget this. You follow him to the edge of the grove. The stars are blinking awake overhead, and the moon has found its rhythm. He turns, eyes warm. Next year, you'll remind me again, won't you? Only if there's cake, you reply. He smiles, radiant and human all at once. And then, like mist catching moonlight, he's gone. Not with a thunderclap, not with a divine flash. Just gone. You stand there for a moment, watching the trees sway gently in his wake. Somewhere, a fig falls with a soft thunk. You pick it up, bite into the warm sweetness, and head back toward the firelight. And in that moment, you realize some birthdays are better when they're forgotten. So now, the story has slipped into silence. The day that began with a missed birthday, a scrambled sunrise, and a very confused god, ends with candlelight, fig-sweet air, and a memory that feels like a dream already fading. You're warm, full, and just a little dusty. But in the best way, the way that says today mattered. Your legs are tired, your mind is soft around the edges, and your thoughts drift like wood smoke through olive branches. You remember the rhythm of wheat being cut, the awkward beauty of a divine whistle, and the soft, bashful grin of a god trying to tie his own sandals. It all happened. Or maybe it didn't. But it lives in you now, tucked behind your eyelids. Breathe in and feel the warmth of that last fire crackling in your chest. Breathe out and let it fade into stars. Somewhere, maybe Apollo is still wandering. Maybe he's found another quiet village. Maybe he's sitting on another stone wall, remembering you. Or maybe, like all good dreams, he only exists when you're ready to fall asleep. Don't worry about remembering every detail. Just carry the feeling, the slow smile, the long shadows, the warmth of shared bread. And as the night deepens, let your own thoughts soften. Let your limbs go heavy. Let the fig-sweet breeze rock you gently toward sleep. You're safe now. There are no omens left to read, no temples left to clean, no gods left to appease. Just your breath. Just this peace. Just the quiet whisper of the day ending.